imagine for a moment that our search for justice isn't about finding one single perfect rule for everything, like, say, absolute equality.
Hmm.
But instead, it's more like we have a toolkit, a set of different standards that we pull out depending on the relationship we're actually in.
That is the big idea, the whole game changer. In David Miller's Principles of Social Justice, he basically argues that, well, if you want to understand what's fair, you don't just dream up a single master principle.
Right.
You have to look at how people actually live together. You have to see what they demand from each other in all these different situations.
And I find that so compelling, this idea that justice is pluralist. We don't have to pick between a totally libertarian world or a purely egalitarian one.
Exactly.
But so what are these different contexts? How does he slice up our social lives?
He breaks it down into three main types of association, and each one has its own dominant principle of justice.
Okay.
So first, think about what he calls instrumental associations. This is the marketplace, your workplace, basically any commercial exchange.
Where you're trying to get something done.
Right. And in that context, the principle that feels most natural is desert. We reward contribution, we reward skill, effort.
Okay, that makes total sense for a job. But if I switch contexts to, say, my family, a solidaristic community, as he calls it,
Yeah.
it feels completely wrong to apply that same logic. You don't ask who deserved dinner the most.
Of course not. It would be absurd. Because there, when it's about solidarity, the principle flips entirely to need. The question becomes, who requires support? Who's vulnerable?
And the third one.
The third is when you're acting as a citizen, as a political equal, and that relationship is dominated by the principle of equality. Equal basic rights, equal civic standing.
So the insight for you, the listener, is that the real debate isn't about picking one of those principles for everything.
It's about knowing which context you're in and then applying the right principle for that context.
That reframes so many arguments. But let's dig into desert, because that one feels tricky. Isn't rewarding contribution just a short step away from a crude meritocracy where people say, well, I'm rich, I must have deserved it?
That's the classic critique, and Miller has a really important answer for it. He puts a major constraint on desert.
Which is?
It only works inside institutions that are themselves reasonably just. The rules have to be public, they have to be fair. If the whole system is rigged, if success is based on your race or who your parents are, then appealing to desert is just. It's just a way to rationalize privilege.
I see. So the background conditions have to be fair for desert to even apply.
Precisely. And he does a similar thing with need. He elevates it. It's not just about charity or feeling sorry for someone.
How does it become an actual claim of justice, then?
By defining basic needs as whatever a person requires to live a minimally decent, self-respecting life. So we're talking about income, healthcare, education, things you need to function in society.
So ignoring those isn't just being unkind.
Miller says it's an injustice, a structural failure of that community.
Okay, so that brings us to the third principle, equality. He's obviously not arguing we should all have the exact same amount of money.
Not at all. His focus is entirely on political standing. Can citizens relate to one another as equals with mutual respect?
And what threatens that?
Huge cumulative gaps in advantage. Think extreme wealth concentration or educational segregation. Things that create such different life experiences that some people effectively become second-class citizens even if they have the same legal rights on paper.
So he gives us this pluralist framework. Justice has many faces. But it's not just descriptive, is it? He's not just saying this is what people think.
No, it's deeply normative. He's giving you a diagnostic tool. You could look at a debate, say, about healthcare and ask, should we treat this as an instrumental good based on desert or as a solidaristic community responding to need? The answer changes everything.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to take away. If a society's shared ideas about fairness, what people feel is deserved, for example, are themselves the product of historical biases or exclusion, how far should a theory like Miller's, one that's grounded in context, go to resist or even reject those popular judgments? Something to consider as you examine the fairness of the world around you.